All right, we are live.
Hello, world.
So Pastor Lon is in Africa doing his Pastor Lon thing as the international traveler that he is. And so Susie and I are back, and we thought we'd jump back into our conversation, our ongoing dialogue about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and what that's been like. So, something interesting to note, and I just wanted to encourage Susie with this, is so because you brought this up, um, uh, and it was very clear you felt very strongly about this. I asked the question like, what's going on with this with you? Like, where did this come from? We actually have done 2 podcasts on it,
Mm-hmm.
which increased my sensitivity to the issue, not just because of what was in the headlines, but because somebody I trust and respect shared their input with me. Susie did. And so I became more aware of what's going on, which led me, when I met with my mentor, to ask him about it. He was like, "Oh, actually, my dad testified before Congress for the sake of Palestinian Christians who were being persecuted." This is like back in maybe the 70s, 80s, you know?
Wow.
And I said, "Is there a good book?" And he's like, "Yeah, you got to read this book by one of my dad's friends, Elias Shakur."
Mhm.
Um, uh, uh, and I texted him, "What's the name of that book?" He texted it back. Um, my mom is about to go to Israel, and
Oh.
she was gonna go to Israel, and then this happened,
Mm.
right?
Oh, okay. Mhm.
And and so I had kind of created a book club for her, just between her and me, where I was
Mhm.
buying books about Israel and sending those to her. And so I sent her like Josephus's book. I sent
Mm.
her, uh, you know, and I knew I wanted to get a Palestinian perspective on Israel,
Mhm.
but I was, I wanted to make sure I sent the right book about that,
Mhm.
right? Like, and so when Brian suggested this book, Blood Brothers, I was like, okay, and I went and I got it on Audible,
Ah.
and so I've been listening to it. I've been listening to it with my son when I take him to school in the morning,
How
because
old is he?
he's a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And they did walkouts all over Chicago for the Palestinians about
Oh,
a week ago.
okay.
And that was an interesting conversation
I want
because,
to hear about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then so anyways, I send this book to my mom, and then I was home last week, and she said, um, we got the book, we started looking at it, and she's part of a book club at her church, and they decided to read this book for their book club. So this is down the street from where, I mean, Susie used to work at this church. This is down the
Okay.
street from her, and
Yep.
it just showed me it does matter. Like, it
Yeah.
actually matters
Yep.
that we talk about these things, and they're people. We can never give up on people, right? Like just
Mhm.
because we think everybody thinks one way, or we have this, it feels sometimes like there's this monolithic, like where we come from, West Michigan, this monolithic, way of thinking. The reality is people are are, are actually very nuanced, and when given credible information, uh, uh, don't always dismiss it, right?
Yep.
Like, and
That's right.
actually embrace it, and really listen to it. And so I was just super encouraged by that. That really blessed me. And even having conversations with my mom, very nuanced, very nuanced conversation and thinking through this. And uh and I thought, wow, this 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 was encouraging to me, that you can actually talk about these things, come away with a more nuanced, less polarizing kind of conversation. So yeah, I
And
just
so
want
now that book, Blood Brothers, I think I have it somewhere here, is the same book that I recommended to you that we had talked about in one of our maybe it was in both of the conversations. So yeah, this is
well, I don't think you actually recommended the book. You told me you interviewed this guy. You met this guy.
Oh, okay. I've recommended it so much that I don't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
But anyway, yes,
And
okay.
then when I came back, I was like, he recommended this book. And you were like, that's the guy I was telling you about. And I was like, oh my God. You know?
Yeah.
And what's cool is my mom's already listened to Ray Baki's talks enough times that when I said this was Ray Baki's friend, she saw him as a credible voice, and so was willing to listen to it. So yeah, it's like these conversations actually are important. They're like they do something.
Yep. I'm
Then,
trying to post this on Facebook. So
okay. No, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, then my son, like, oh, this was hilarious for me. So my son, I've just been sneaking it on, and he's dead tired in the morning. We leave at 7, we go early. He's like always half asleep, and I would just like, hit play and start playing this. And I don't know if he's sleeping. He's always playing a game on his phone. So is he paying attention? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew Chicago had this walkout. All the high schools did a walkout on behalf of the Palestinians, which isn't surprising, right? We kind of sometimes are the opposite.
I wish I lived in Chicago.
Oh, I know. But it can get monolithic here too, right? Like where on the other side, right? Like, and so I asked him about that. I was like, what do you think about all that? What's the conversation around this at your school? Yeah. And he said the most fascinating thing. He said, well, we're Christians, so I should be more on the Jewish side, right, Dad? I'm not sure what I think about that, but
right.
I kind of felt weird because wouldn't we be more on the Jewish side, on the Israel side? And I said, have you been listening to the book that I've been listening to? He's like, well, a little bit. I was like, that guy is Palestinian. And he was like, what? He's really? I was like, yeah. And so like he's been listening more carefully now. And then I like wrote everything down. But even to have him say that to me was so interesting, right? Like that he had, and I would have never thought, like, because it's not like we're like this pro-Israel family. Like I would never like think that, like, there's no reason he would have that perspective, but just he assumed it. Like that's how powerful the master narrative is.
Yes.
Right. That
Right.
even started to influence him in that way. So
yeah.
So that's part of what I've been going through on it, and listening to this book, which I totally recommend the book. It's very nuanced. It's very, the guy is coming from a place of peace, a very Christ-centered place, but also experienced very firsthand as his own family, the persecution from what I'm learning about the Zionist Jewish movement is I mean, I want to look more into it, but it was kind of a minority voice in the Jewish community that, has a very like typical, it's going to be our way or the highway kind of ideology and methodology behind it that I've never even heard about before. I had no idea about this, right? Like, and so that's been really fascinating to me. to learn about as well. And once you know that, it's like a lot of things make a lot more sense about how Palestinians are reacting to things, how the Middle East is reacting to things, it's like I'm learning the older I get, when people are really mad at me because I'm a Christian or because of whatever, like I don't think they're the crazy one. I think, what do I not know?
That's good. That's really good.
What is it that I don't know
Yep.
that has been done to them in the name of my religion that I
Yeah.
need to find out about? Because
Right.
people aren't usually mad, as like crazy mad about something without reason. Like very seldom is that the case. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's always good to ask, like, what are you really angry about? What's going on here? Right. So that's some of what I've been going through, like with this whole conversation. So
yeah. Is there anyone that you have these conversations with?
I mean, it hasn't really come up a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe partially. Well, okay, so there's a Jewish guy that he's in his 70s, he's about my dad's age, a little younger than what my dad would be if he was still alive. And he's become a really close friend at Panera, and we have really long conversations. I have the most lengthy spiritual conversations at Panera. I had a 2-hour conversation with my neighbor at Panera, and
Wow.
who is a Muslim who grew up in Cabrini Green, African American woman. Incredible conversation. But Noam, that's what I found out. I was like, I'm learning about the Zionists, and I'm learning that they attacked the British.
Yeah.
And he goes, my grandfather used to smuggle out information for the Zionists from the British.
Wow.
And the British were trying to have him killed. Right. And it was like, wow, this is like, when I had no idea about all of this history. Right. It's kind of like when I started researching African American history. It's like, why don't I know about this stuff? Like, this seems like kind of pretty important information to understand, like, what's really going on here. How is this not like, just, you should know this? Like, like, here's like 5 major conflicts on the planet. If you leave an American high school, you should know what the nuanced roots of these conflicts are before you go out as a voting citizen.
Yeah.
Like what is up with it?
Yeah. Let's see, how old was I? I was 16, so that was it was in the 80s. I with my high school, I went to Italy, and we had and it was nuns who took us, because I went to an all-girl Catholic high school. And so, we visited a lot of churches, tourist areas, and we went all over Italy. We were in Florence and Rome and Venice and like everywhere. And I will never forget what this person said about, and he said it in jest. He said it like it was a funny thing. I was like, so we've got Americans here today, those that live in their little fantasy bubble, not knowing anything that's going on, and they're so well protected, and they just live like, that they're on a show, and it's all about them. And he just kept on and on and on. And I thought, what do you mean? Because here I am, young, and this is my first time outside side of the country. I mean, because I grew up going to Puerto Rico, and it's a little different, but it just stayed with me because I thought, is that what Italians think of us?
Wow.
Well, come to find out, as I grew up, it's like that's what the whole world thinks of us.
Right.
And it's true. It's true. It's our design, it was intentionally designed for us to be a bubble and keep us busy working, thinking about survival, um and now it's with the entertainment industry and how people are wearing those goggles. I don't know what they're called, but you see whatever, your apps and all that kind of stuff. Like we are self-centered, and then also just oblivious to any narratives outside of the ones that we are fed.
Right.
And so and if the IDF, if the Jewish government, the Jewish government has influence over our media, and that's come out in the news and all that. So and so for a while, CNN couldn't put out news unless it was approved by them first, anything that had to do with them. And I don't know if I'm pretty sure it's still the same, but anyway, that's just one example. Like, how many other gatekeepers are there for the information that's fed to us, right?
Yeah.
And so here we are. We are so sequestered, and we don't even realize how sequestered we are. So, that's why I reach out to other news agencies outside of our country, because I always think about that Italian guy, and I think, okay, well, I want to know what India thinks about us, or I want to know what Australia is thinking about us. I want to know what South Africa is thinking about us. The UK and is pretty much the same as us. We're in tandem, but I have been more open to the news outside of here, which I wasn't as open before, right? Because we are programmed to trust our sources, right? These are our sources. These are the faces that we grow up seeing on the news. These are the voices we grow up listening to. So it took a little bit for me to say, okay, I'm gonna reach out, and I'm gonna learn on my own. And it's been a fascinating journey. I realized, that I was in a box, and I didn't even realize I was in a box.
Right.
And now that I'm not, well, I don't know, maybe I'm still in a box, right? Because
You're
learning,
always in a box.
right?
You're always in a box. Yeah.
I can never go back into that box again.
Yeah.
And I asked, well, the reason why I asked you, who else do you talk to, is because I don't have anyone to talk to.
Yeah.
My colleague, I do talk to my colleagues, and I do, and they're loving and they're beautiful. So I'm not speaking like anything negative about them, but we're all in a box.
Yeah.
And it's isolating. It's isolating. It's lonely, because people will look at me like I'm crazy. They will look at other people that I sound like they're crazy, right? And so this has been really interesting. And those in power have the power to shut us up. They have the power to make us look like we don't know what we're talking about. Or, Susie, you're not focusing on what's really important. We have to get back to this. And I'm like, well, this is connected to this, which is connected to this, which is connected to this, and we're all connected. So, and that's what's missing. We do not realize how connected we are with the entire world because we are in this sequestered little entertainment, self-centered bubble. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder, for me, I wonder if it was, so I went to Northwestern, I stayed in a arts dorm, so a little bit different than Grand Rapids, right? And I think for me, experiencing what it's like to be a misunderstood. So at Northwestern, I'm an evangelical Christian who believes the Bible is the word of God. I am a minority, like immediately, like in that context. And so feeling that, having that experience of being around people who think something about you that you don't understand how they could think that about you, makes you wonder, have I done that to people? Right? Like, if they could think this about me, what have I, and then what have, and then also experiencing them as different than what I was taught they were, right? Like, wow, these are really kind, generous, justice-minded, fair, hardworking individuals, that don't, that I was kind of taught were like the devil, right? Like, and just that, like, I think experiencing that cross-cultural dissonance, like you did when you went to Italy, and having someone, like, I think it's so important to understanding, like, wow, that two things, like, things are very complex, but also there are roots to things that are very nuanced, right? It's kind of like, the more I like hear about what happened in Palestine, right, you start to get down to who is at the root of the problem, right? And I'm more and more, like, as I read history, like, it's like so much of history is really run by gangsters.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because we're going to get back to that.
Oh, okay. It's so fascinating. Like you think about Marxism. Marxism is kind of coming from, I think, originally a good place of like, hey, wait a minute, like, these landowners just like do whatever the hell they want with all of us, and like, we should do something about this, right?
Right.
And then you read, like, I did some research on Stalin, and you realize this guy was just a gangster. I mean, if Russia had been Republican, he would have gangstered the Republicans. If he had been in America and could have gotten away with it, he would have made himself dictator here. Like, he was not a Marxist. He was not a communist. He was a self-centered opportunist that tried to take over the world, right? Like, out of a place of, like, a Pharaoh type place of ego, right? And what I'm realizing, these pharaohs, they're everywhere. They were in the Catholic Church, they're in the evangelical church, they're in the liberal church. They're like, you have gangsters everywhere who actually don't give a rep about ideology. They'll use it to gangster everybody. They'll use it as a litmus test, and discard it as soon as it doesn't work for them. And it's kind of like, the more I'm hearing about, like, and I need to do more research. Like, I just never, I never want to just hear one side of any story, but to hear, like like he tells this story where he did research. He was trying to figure out what has happened here, right? And so he starts researching the history of Zionism, which is basically the idea that Israel belongs in Palestine, and that's their land. God promised it to them. We're supposed to take it. That's where we're supposed to be, right? And the Zionists in the United States were lobbying President Roosevelt during World War II. And he had a hard line in the sand because he was like, no, there's Palestinians there that have been there for thousands of years. We can't just kick them out. We got to figure something else out. So he had created a strategy where he was sending a guy around to welcome Jews into all the Allied countries. That was his solution. Like, we're going to make sure that they have a home, and any of the Allied countries that fought against Hitler will welcome them in. Well, two things happened. Number one, a lot of those countries said, no, we don't want them to come here. That was part of what was happening. But the crazier part of what was happening is the Zionists blackballed this guy that was out with an alternative solution to their solution. They smeared this guy and slammed him to the Jewish community, right? And then when Roosevelt died, they went after the next president. They raised something like $47 million to lobby Washington, D.C. for the stake of the Palestinian takeover Palestine Jewish solution to not go through what they just had gone through again. And I think it was Truman. I think it was Truman was the president. And he said to somebody, basically, I have a lot of Jewish constituents. I don't have any Palestinian constituents. So he made a political calculus for the sake of this, what was sort of like a minority group. I mean, there were plenty of Jewish folks that felt, even on religious basis, that they were not supposed to go back to Palestine until the Messiah came. Right. Like, and they're like, the Messiah has not come. We're not supposed to do this. Actually, really bad things are going to happen if we do this. Right. And so there was like very much like a Republican Democrat type thing where this internal fight within the Jewish community and the desire to have your solution win turned this group of, this is the way the book is saying, I need to double check, but like the narrative that the book is, and I trust this guy, he seemed very credible to me, but
well, and it is, I have read so much, and he just gives, he's accurate, but you're just getting the, what do you call that? The first layer. It's so deep.
It's crazy. And like, even to the point where this group attacked the British like terrorists, right? So because they weren't on board with their way of doing things, because the British were respecting the Palestinians, and they were like, they were basically like, no, we're not having that. We're not having that. And they even, this was like proven. They bombed their own people in Iraq and blamed it on Arabs to motivate, because not enough people were coming to Palestine. And so they actually did terrorist attacks against their own people. Found out later that it was the prime minister of Israel, like I think knew about it and was okay with it, to motivate the Jews in Iraq to leave Iraq en masse to come to Israel. The fear of a manufactured terrorist that was done by the Zionists themselves. Like, that's some like Ku Klux Klan type stuff, right? Like, that's what happened in Chicago with white flight and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. There were real estate agents who wanted to make money of off of segregation
Yep.
that terrorized white residents and got them to leave, right? And
Mm.
manufactured certain
Yep.
situations for the sake of it. And this is where it's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't take
Mm-mm.
a large conspiracy
Mm-mm.
to fool us. It
No.
takes like, it can take 3 or 4 bad actors that are so evil, that are so hell-bent on having it their way, that you can't even believe they would do it.
Right.
And you got to watch out for the gangsters, because
Yeah.
they will show up sometimes. And when you meet a gangster, you got to treat them like a gangster. You got to like shut them up, not have anything to do with them, and call it for what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm, the more I hear about this, it's like that's what happened, and that it didn't get called out,
Mm-mm.
you know.
Mm-mm.
So yeah.
No. 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 Well, you know, uh, there's if now, okay, if they were able to, the Zionists, if they were able to uh, uh, bomb places in other places in the Middle East, and um, but blame it on someone else, right? It's very possible, very, 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 very possible that that's been done here as well. And there's a lot of, when the after 9/11, when they did the investigation and the reports came out and all that, um yeah, there was a lot pointing to the fact that that was a very controlled investigation. The cleanup happened expediently, um, and uh, and come to find out that um, that Israel helped with that investigation. Uh,
Mhm.
and, and so, and there's also documented evidence, because people say, well, the Palestinians were celebrating, on 9/11. Well, there's also documented evidence that there were also Jewish people in New York that were celebrating as well. They knew exactly where to stand. They, to watch what happened. So, so, all that and all of this is documented. So I'm not like being a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. But that kind of stuff is not shared with us. That's the kind of stuff that's hidden, that's buried. We are fed the narrative of, oh, this was Osama bin Laden, or this was, oh, and now we're going to go after Hussein. And there's so many bigger things that are behind the scenes, and we're fed what we need to be fed so that we can be controlled, so that we can go along with the narrative, so that we don't interfere with what the big boys are doing. And so once uh, and there's a lot of documented evidence everywhere. And so as a Christian, how do I feel about being played like that by my government? Well, I have a lot of feelings, but for me, what does that look like? We are to be wise.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are to be wise.
Right.
Which means we have been gullible, right? We have been gullible. We have been played um, about a lot of different things. And so whenever I hear someone say, well, we need to submit to the government, we need to do this, and or as a Christian, we need to maintain the peace and not cause any strife. And I'm thinking, Yeah, that might be your way of being a Christian, but I'm about justice. I'm about that humanity, all of humanity, not just certain ethnic groups, all of humanity is is um is honored, respected with dignity. And as a Christian, if we can't do that, if we are more selective based on the narratives that have fed us, then we need to not we need to question what we need to question our we need to how do I say this in a good way? We need to question everything. We need
Yeah,
to question
yeah,
everything,
everything.
absolutely everything.
Right. And what I love at that point in Blood Brothers where he's actually saying what I realized was that even the Zionists were victims of a, a wickedness and evil that he calls militarism, right? And that's more and more what I'm realizing. Like you hear about people that grew up in Hamas and the way they are, right? And how they were killing their own people in prison, kind of very similar, like this ideology, like you have to have our ideology or we're going to get rid of you, right? Like those bad actors in any context
Mhm.
become a problem, right? And they don't want peace, right? They
Yeah,
don't want to get along. Their whole power is based on having an enemy, right?
right.
Right. And I think this is how the devil does it. Like he's got people on both sides. I mean, I deal with this like on a very micro level with all these gang cliques that we have, all these 14-year-olds that are convinced their life purpose is to murder another 14-year-old because he's part of a rival clique. I mean, it's so black and white, but it's like this is the same script the devil's been playing on countries, kids for years, right? And it's like once you cross over to there is an enemy that I have to destroy by any means necessary. Once you cross over to that situation, and
Yeah,
and I love it because he's saying that's who the enemy is. The
right,
whatever voice is saying that,
right.
that's the voice you need to speak out against,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right? You
yeah,
know, and
yeah.
that's where like that's what we need to be sensitive to is
Mhm,
this irrational, no, you don't understand, they're bad, right?
mhm,
Like as soon as I
mhm,
hear that from you,
mhm,
and
mhm,
and I
mhm.
agree, like there are like Stalins, right? Like there sometimes you do have to make a decision. Like this person has no desire to compromise, no desire, like they just want to kill folks. But is that everybody on that side? Or is that a really small group of people that we all should be working together to get rid of from both sides of this conflict, right?
Right,
Like
right,
and
right,
and 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 I think like on the road to peace, that's a lot of times like what you really need. You got to figure out who's the voice that just don't want peace
right, right.
on
Exactly.
both sides, and we cannot be listening to these folks. Don't have a you cannot have a place at this table if you don't believe that that
Yeah,
that God is big enough to get us on the same page. Like if
right,
you don't believe that and you're actually fighting against that, like like we need to not have you part of this conversation anymore,
right.
right? Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's just fascinating that that sort of ideology, like a Nazi ideology, shows up then in
Yeah.
this small group of you know Jews that it's almost like it beget that, right?
Right.
Like and
And there are traces. I mean, if we look throughout history, there are traces of what created the Nazi regime those same traces are similar to what created us as well, right? There's so many different connections.
Well, it's all of human history, though. I mean,
Exactly.
it
Exactly.
predates Europe. It predates.
Right.
I mean, it's just how the devil plays us, man.
Right.
He's a master at it. Like,
And he makes us, and so we think, oh no, that's just their problem. That's just them. That's just their history. Meanwhile, we have traces of all of that, all of it because of humanity. We are humanity.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's and that's where I love like where we are with Genesis. I was reading Jude today, and it's just like they went the way of Cain, and it's like okay, this way of Cain is, I'm not going to repent. I'm the right one here. I'm not my brother's keeper. I'm not changing. I'm, like, and like when we go that way, it's hell on earth. Like, and that's what Genesis actually, it literally says, look what happens. And generation after generation, when this attitude gets put in place, right? It's like what you do in your workshop. Once supremacy, any sort of supremacy, like I'm right just because I am who I am.
And I'm right because the narrative has said that I'm right. There's so many people before me that have said they're right, which makes me right.
Right. And how dare my little brother come and correct me? Right? Like, how dare God say that the way I'm doing it is not okay?
Right.
Right. That entitlement, right? And it's like,
and you know what that makes me think of? It makes me think of all the little kids that were born, born in the master's home, on slave plantations, right? They were born into the system. They were born knowing this is how it's done. We, the white people, are here. This is what those that are Black, this is what they do. This is how we treat them. This is it. And when you're born into the system, we think that we think that we can't see outside of it. We can't see outside of it unless we choose to see. Okay, I've got to go in a couple minutes. But there's a lot there.
No, it's really good.
Thank you for engaging.
Yeah,
thank you for digging into Blood Brothers. Thank you for thinking about it. And not thank you me, but on behalf of all people who are being oppressed in the entire world. This is what we need to be doing. We need to be learning about what is happening and not just think, oh, well, I just have to focus on me. Yes, we can focus on me, but we can also be aware of what's happening because we elect officials who decide how we're going to treat people all over the world. So it matters. All of it matters.
Yeah, it does. Amen.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, sister, always good.
All right. Blessings. And I'll talk to you. I'll see you next week.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye.